Welcome to the C Sharp programming tutorial, and today we'll be talking about how we can reuse our code again and again using class libraries in C Sharp. This is a very interesting topic, so let's get to it. So I used to get annoyed a lot when let's say our lecturer would tell us to go and create maybe a certain project or an assignment, and I would write like multiple lines of code, let's say 200 lines of code or 300 lines of code, and then again next week she tells us, okay, go and write another project, and I also write 300 lines or 200 lines of code. And I realized that, oh man, usually the codes are similar because maybe this week is building from last week's work, and I found that the stuff that I wrote in this code, I could have used it in this other project. So usually what we used to do is to try and copy and paste the parts of the code that were relevant and then migrate them to the new project so that we can maybe change the variables here and there, or maybe change the logic. But you could see that these things are similar. So now we are going to learn how to use a class library so that we can reuse our code every time we do something similar to what we did in the previous project, right? So let's say you want to add two numbers or you want to subtract numbers. You don't always have to create two variables and then always have the plus and minus signs each and every time, or having a loop to add. Sometimes it's tiring. You just want to work on the new things, and then the old stuff, you just have to reference them, or you need to get them from somewhere so that you can reuse them as well. So today we're going to learn how to create a class library so that we can, it's in the name, the library is the stuff that you reuse to reference. So in this case, we're going to create a new project. So we're going to create a new project. We're going to use the C# language, and then you can say all project types. Now here you're going to search class library like that. So when you search class, it's going to show class library, raise a class, and we are going to select the class library.net framework. So like that, so that we can have the DLL. You see the DLL right there. You should click the one that has the DLL, because if it doesn't have the DLL, it gets a little bit tough to reference the project in your future projects. And then we hit next. So in this project, I would like us to create, let's say, a calculator, right? So in this case, we're going to name this my calculator. So let's say my calculator like that. I'd like us to place everything in the same directory, so solution and project, and then we continue with the .NET framework as is. So, and then we're going to create the class library, right? So you see that we have, using system or whatever, we have the skeleton, right? So the namespace is my calculator, but you see the public class one, I don't like the name of the public class one. So what we can do is we can come to the Solution Explorer and change the name of the class. And in this case, we're going to rename it to, let's say, calculate. Let's say the class name is calculate, right? So, and then you're going to click yes, because it will try to change the class names everywhere, right? So we now have the class. Now we're trying to build a simple calculator app, so we need methods for addition, subtraction, and multiplication. I won't do a lot of stuff, I'm just showing a demo now. So what we'll need is a few methods, right? So let me just quickly write down the methods, and so we can talk about them. So we have the method for adding. So we're just receiving two arguments, that is x and y, right? So after receiving them, we'll add them and we return them to the calling method, or to the calling code, whatever, to the calling section of the code. So let's add the second part, and the subtract works relatively the same. It's just that there's a minus sign, and also the multiplication sign works relatively the same. It's just that there's a multiplication operation right there, right? So we now have the contents of the code. Now the very next part is very important, right? So without doing this part that I'm about to show you, the code might not actually work, right? So here's what we do. You are going to build this solution. So you're going to say build and then build solution. You could have said Control-Shift-B. This makes sure that the DLL file that we talked about earlier is created. Without building your solution, you cannot actually find the DLL file, right? So now we've built our solution. Now, let me show you how we can use this class library in another project. Right, so we're going to create another project. In this case, we're going to create a console project. So let's create new project and console.app. So we'll just use the recent templates. So for the project name, let's call it calc app, like that. So we have calc app, right, and then click create. So we have the calc app skeleton, and this is what we normally have. So if you've been coding for a while, this is what you know, this console app skeleton, right? So now, how do we get the class to actually come do the work for us in this program, right? So the first thing that you're going to do, if you don't have a solution explorer right there, you're just going to click view and then click solution explorer, or control alt L, and the solution explorer will come, right? So because we need this reference in the solutions explorer, so you're going to right click on references, and then you're going to add a reference. It shows here because I've already worked on the DLL files, but if it doesn't show the DLL files, like if it shows nothing here, you can click browse. After clicking browse, you're going to go to the folder that you saved your class library. So I'm just going to click my calculator, and you're going to get this as usual, and you're going to click bin, then debug, and you'll get the DLL file under debug, right? So you're going to click that and then OK, and you're going to say OK here as well. Now, if you look under your references, you will have a new reference. So you had analyzers, Microsoft, but now you have my calculator, and also system core. I'm sure you're familiar with the system references because they are the ones that are in the library section of your code, like the first few lines. So, but now we have my calculator as a reference. In other words, we can use all the properties of the my calculator, right? So in other words, we can come here and say using my calculator, because now we have it as a reference. So we can use whatever my calculator has to offer. So using my calculator. So if you remember in the my calculator, let me just add this line. So we have using my calculator, and then I added that line to always write right line instead of having console. We have the my calculator. So if you can remember correctly, it's very important to remember what you had in your calculator library. You had the class calculate. So in other words, we're going to instantiate, or we're going to create an object of type calculate. So this is, we're going to say calculate, and as you can see, it shows the class. We see class calculate. So we can access the class of the my calculator class library. So let's say calculate and calc. Let me just call it my calc. So this is my calculation. So we're going to say new calculate, because this is how we actually create objects. If you're new to objects and classes, this is how we create an instance of a class. We now have my calc, new calculate, right? So we can do a lot of cool things with this new object that we just created, right? Because it is of class calculate, which means it has access to what calculate has to offer, right? So in other words, we can do something like this. Let's say we want to, let's say int, by the way, because it was int. So int, we want to sum, right? So in other words, we can, let's say we want to sum two numbers. Let's say 5 plus 5. What we can do is we can say my calc dot add. Remember, we had a method that we created that side that was going to be used to add two numbers without us having to have 5 plus 5 or x plus y or anything like that. Because let's say we had user input, this would be user input, and we would have their user input here and their user input here, right? So we have 5 plus 5, and let's say we had another variable, let's say difference. So in other words, we're going to say my calc subtract, but let's change the arguments here. Let me just say 7, right? So in other words, here we're in the first sum, or in sum we expect 10, and in subtract we expect 7 minus 5. And now let's say product, int product, right? So equal to my calc dot multiply. Now look how beautiful that is. You remember how our code was for multiplying, adding, and subtracting. You remember how long it was? Now we just had to write like 3 lines of code for just that. And you remember there were methods and return statements and whatnot. So here we are able to reuse that addition code, subtraction code, and multiply code. Now let's try to run this. Let me just add the read line real quick. So we have the read line. Now let's try to run this and see if it works. Right, I forgot that we actually don't have an output strategy. There is nothing to output because we don't have write line. So let's have our write lines right here. So we have sum. Let's see. Let's print out sum first, like that. I'll just try to copy this. Right. So in sum we expect 10. Diff we expect 2. Product we expect 25. So let's run this. 10 to 25. In other words, we were able to reference our class library to use its own method. Now imagine if the library was extensive. Instead of just having additions and subtractions, you can use this for an array of other things, right? So if you see that you are rewriting the code too much and this code can be standardized into a class library, you can always create your own class library so that you can reuse that code next time. So, right, I hope this was helpful and I hope you learned something new today. And if you'd like to see more STEM related content or tech related content from me, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll be releasing new videos next week. I always release videos each and every Friday. So be sure to like and subscribe so that you'll be notified whenever I put out new videos. Remember to keep education fashionable. I will see you in the next one.